Good morning and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. This morning we'll be looking at another one of the Buddha's discourses. So we can begin by paying homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So, as mentioned, we'll be looking at one of the suttas. This one is from the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 5, sutta number 95, which is called the Akupa Sutta. So, Akupa means unshakable. And in the suttas, the term Akupa is commonly used to refer to awakening. This is referring to one of the qualities of awakening, which is that it is unshakable. Once one has reached any of the stages of awakening, but again, particularly full awakening, but any of the stages of awakening, it is irreversible. And also it carries with it an absolute certainty that one has come closer to a direct experience of the truth of reality. So it's called unshakable because, again, first off, it can't be reversed or taken away. And second, one has absolute certainty, absolute confidence. So one's faith in the Dhamma is unshakable. Once one has these, again, layers of direct experience. So the sutta begins, the Buddha says, Panchahi bhikkhave dhammehi samanagato bhikkhu nachara seva akupang pativijjati. So he says, endowed with 5 things, monastic, in no long time, so nachara seva, nacharasa means not in a long time, so it won't take a long time. Akupang pativijjati, so akupang again means the unshakable. Which is here it's most likely referring to full awakening, though it can be used to refer to the lower stages as well. And pativijjati comes from, well, the verb vijjati literally means to pierce. So pativijjati means to pierce through. So one of the metaphors the Buddha sometimes uses is piercing through the veil of delusion, so the veil of ignorance or misunderstanding. So you pierce through that and you can see things as they really are. Like, so the image is a bit like if you have a veil covering your eyes so you can't see clearly. But once you pierce through that veil, then you can see what's outside. So in the same way, we have a veil of delusion obstructing our vision of reality. And if we can pierce through that, then we can see things as they are. So, and the Buddha says, Katamehi panchahi, so what 5? It says, Ida bhikkhave bhikkhu, so here monastic, and he lists 5 qualities. So the first one, atta patisambheda patto. Patta means has reached or attained. And patisambheda, this is the central word of this sutta. So this appears in 4 out of 5 of the 5 qualities. Patisambheda, it's commonly been translated as discrimination or discriminative wisdom, discriminating understanding. And the formulation of this Pali word comes from the verb bindati, which means to break apart or to separate. and the prefix sang, which means together, and pati, which means back or again, or to return. So patisambhida, it has this feeling of breaking things apart and then putting them back together again. So the sense of clearly analyzing and understanding the components of things. Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi selected the word discrimination for this, based on Ajahn Bhante Nyanamoli's translations. Again, this idea that in discrimination, we're clearly separating things into different categories and clearly understanding the contents of each of these categories, but also seeing how all of it fits together. So discriminating the separate categories, but also understanding how they all fit together into a unified whole. And patisambhida, it appears in a few suttas, and later on in the development of the Buddhist texts, it became the central theme of the book called Patisambhida Magga, the Path of Discrimination, which is considered a proto-Abhidhamma work, in that it was most likely composed prior to the Abhidhamma Pitaka, but sometime after the rest of the Sutta Pitaka. So it's a interesting text, which seems to be, again, one of the early attempts to compile an analytical examination of the abstract principles of Dhamma. But we're not talking about the Patisambhida Magga today. Instead, we're talking about this particular discourse. So Patisambhida, again, means discriminative wisdom, or discrimination, or analytical discrimination. This ability to divide things into separate categories and groups, and to understand also how these groups fit together. So atta patisambhida, the word atta has a few different meanings. One of the most basic meanings is benefit, or welfare, or that which is good in both an ordinary sense, such as things which are supportive to one's health and happiness and so on, but also in a transcendent sense. So atta also has the meaning of that which is good in terms of awakening. And the term atta also is sometimes used to mean the highest good, which is full awakening. Similarly, atta can also mean the meaning or benefit on hand. So the meaning or benefit of something. So the meaning of words that are spoken, in particular meaning of the suttas, or meaning of the Dhamma. So atta patisambhida then is this discriminative wisdom which understands welfare, which understands goodness, which understands benefit, which understands what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, which understands what is helpful and what is harmful, and in particular understands what is helpful for making progress towards the highest goal, the highest good, which is awakening, and what is obstructive towards that same highest goal, that same highest good. And so this is important because in Buddhist practice, we're actually not just openly accepting everything. We're not equally tolerant of everything, but rather we're trying to clearly understand what helps us to make progress towards awakening and what hinders us. So we do try to distinguish between what is the path and what is not the path, what is conducive to awakening and what is obstructive. And the next term, Dhamma patisambhida pato, so one who's attained discriminative wisdom of the Dhamma. So this analytical insight into the Dhamma. So the first one is, again, taken in its more simple meaning, understanding welfare or benefit, and here it's understanding the Dhamma. So this discriminative understanding of the Dhamma. So for example, being able to distinguish Dhamma from adhamma. So understanding correct Dhamma from incorrect Dhamma. Understanding what is in accordance with the Buddha's teachings and what is not in accordance with the Buddha's teachings. So being able to distinguish, to discriminate between accurate teachings and inaccurate teachings. And the third one, nirutti patisambhida pato. So nirutti has the meaning of language, words. So nirutti patisambhida. So this discriminative analysis of language, of words. So of understanding the meaning of words, understanding the use of language, understanding how to speak in a way which is understandable and comprehensible to people. And also how to understand what's being said to us. So this also is very important because often in communication, we're all using words, but do we actually understand each other? Do we actually have a shared understanding of the meaning and usage of these words? So this discriminative insight into language. So it's investigating what people are saying and why they're saying it and what they mean by what they're saying, so that we can understand where they're coming from. We can understand what they're trying to communicate. And also we understand how to communicate to them. So this is relevant both on the level of understanding the Dhamma, because if we want to understand a Dhamma teaching, then we need to understand the language that it's being presented in. We need to understand how the words are being used. And in approaching the Buddha's teachings, this is very important because often we encounter words in Dhamma teachings which are being used in a somewhat different way than they're used in other contexts. So if we interpret those words, so the Dhamma words, as though they had their mundane or worldly meaning, then we're actually going to completely miss the teaching that's being presented. For example, words like liberation. You can hear the word liberation used in many different non-Buddhist contexts, and it has a few different possible meanings. But within a Buddhist context, it has a specific meaning, which is not the same as what it means in a non-Buddhist context. So in this case, it's important to have this discriminative understanding of language. So understanding that when a word is used in the context of Buddhism, it might have a somewhat different meaning than when it's used in a non-Buddhist context. Otherwise, we can get very confused about what the Dhamma is saying, what the Dhamma means. And the fourth one is on a similar line. So patibhana patisambhida. So patibhana comes from the verb bhanati, which means to proclaim or to speak. And it has a lofty sense to it. So patibhana then means eloquence or inspired speech. So patibhana has this meaning of the as a quality of a person. It's the ability to communicate eloquently, to communicate in a way which is precise and clear, but also in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. So this is often it's spoken about as being one of the qualities of a good Dhamma teacher, is that they have this quality of patibhana, the ability to speak in a way which is clear and precise, but also aesthetically appealing. And this is important because this is one of the ways that we can reach people with the Dhamma. So speaking in a way which is pleasing to the ear, perhaps, but which more importantly is communicating the Dhamma accurately, without loss of meaning. And also finding creative ways of communicating. So finding ways of communicating which is perhaps approaching a topic from a different angle or different side than what people are used to. This is another way that we can help to illuminate the meaning of something, is by finding new ways of expressing the same idea. Often someone's heard something said in a particular stock way so many times that they don't even hear it anymore. And they didn't understand it the first time, and they didn't understand it the 10th time. And they're not going to understand it the 100th time. But if that same teaching is presented using different wording, different phrasing from a different angle and perspective, then they might start to understand what it's talking about. So Patibana Patisambhada is this ability to analyze and understand the application of eloquence. So the ability to use words in a clear, precise, and informative way. And so in the context of learning Dhamma, again, this is recognizing for example, the poetic forms of Dhamma that we encounter, such as much of the Khuddaka Nikaya, the Dhammapada, the Sutta Nipata, Udana Itivuttaka, the Therigatha, as well as much of the poetry that we find in the Samyutta Nikaya and the Anguttara Nikaya. Well, first off, it's understanding that the poetic format is not the point, but it's the meaning that's being communicated. So not getting hung up on the poetic format itself, but looking at the underlying meaning. And then also when we're in the role of communicating Dhamma, it's always considering how to communicate eloquently, how to communicate in a way which is creative without losing the essence of what's being said. So communicating in a way which reaches one's audience without any distortion or alteration of the underlying meaning. Then the fifth quality that Buddha mentions, he says, yatha vimutang chittang pachavekati. So yatha vimutang, yatha means as it is, and vimutta means liberated. And chittang is the mind. And pachavekati literally means to look back at. So to review or to reflect on. So yatha vimutang chittang pachavekati means to review to what extent the mind is liberated. So in other words, one should be periodically reflecting back on the state of one's mind, periodically reflecting on how much progress we've made towards liberation. How are we doing on liberating the mind from greed, hatred, and delusion? How are we doing on liberating the mind from the hindrances, from the defilements? So understanding, first off, have we made any progress? Second, what kind of progress have we made? And understanding what have we been doing that's been either supporting progress or hindering progress. So understanding what we can do that will increase our progress towards liberation. Understanding, again, discriminating between practices and perspectives which have supported us in increasing the liberation of the mind, and what has hindered it, what has prevented us or held us back or caused backsliding. So being able to discriminate once again between practices and perspectives which lead towards awakening and those which lead away. And also reflecting upon the extent of one's own mental liberation is also helpful for cultivating faith in the Dhamma. Because usually if we've been practicing for a while, then when we review the mind, we can see that we've been making progress. Maybe not as quickly as we would like or as deeply as we would like, but usually we'll see that we've been making progress. And that helps to give us confidence that we're on the right track, that we're doing something meaningful, something genuinely beneficial. And so then the Buddha concludes, he says, Imehi ko bhikkhave panchahi dhammehi samanagato bhikkhu natura seva akupang pativejati. So when a monastic has these five dhammas, these five things, then in no long time they will reach the unshakable. So that's the end of the sutta. So we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And at this time, I can take any questions that you might have on this particular sutta. So hello to all the people joining in online. So hello to Usha, John, Za, Yankee, Amaranta, Douglas, Matthias, Bhumika, Yudi, Miguel, Jayanta, Peggy, Richard, Vidura, Arabish, and Sud. Welcome. And I don't see any questions. Are there any questions from the monastery residents? No? No questions? Well, that might be enough. Sometimes the sutta speaks for itself and not much more needs to be said. So we can go ahead and conclude at this time, and you're welcome to join us this evening for the evening's Dhamma program. Otherwise, we can conclude with 3 more sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.